Good evening and welcome to Unfiltered. I'm Aldrin Simpier. Within a space of less than a month, the mayors of the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality and the city of Johannesburg were ousted through motions of no confidence. This has a negative bearing on service delivery to the residents who voted these officials into power and into council. In August, a plan to scrap the Mayoral executive committee system in Nelson Mandela Bay took its first step after being gazetted. Tonight we ask, should the Mayoral executive system be scrapped entirely? Let's welcome from via Zoom Professor Dirk Coetzee, who is a professor of political science at UNISA. Vuyo Mhlokoti, the Deputy Director General for the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs in the Eastern Cape, will also be joining us, as well as Retief Odendaal, who is the newly elected Executive Mayor at the Nelson Mandela Bay Municipality. Remember that you can be part of the conversation by using our Twitter handle at Unfiltered, and also you can go onto Facebook, and all you have to do is just search for Unfiltered. But first, let's take a listen to what the newly elected Premier of Gauteng, Panyaza Lesufi, had to say about the instability that is caused by coalition governments.
Cooperative from Human Settlement to be a standalone department so that it gives attention to local government and it gives attention to coalition in particular, how to manage coalition and how to assist. But because some of the things, they just need conflict resolution rather than vote of no confidence. You just bring the parties involved, get a professional mediator, assist them. You must not be quick to have vote of confidence. These things create instability. And my worry is that we are losing skilled engineers, skilled people, because there's no one wants to work in an environment that is not stable.
Professor Dirk Coetzee now joining us for this conversation. Prof, good evening and welcome to Unfiltered. It goes without saying that there has been there's been this lack of service delivery that has been complained about, and all of this also coming from the root causes of the instability of coalition governments. And now we can see some sort of responses, the one in the Eastern Cape, and now also looking at what is happening here in Gauteng. Your take on it?
Yes, this is very unfortunate that we are in this situation where there was a good beginning after last year's election. It looked like it will be able to have learned the lessons, that the problematic lessons of the period before that, from 2016 onwards. But we are now to some extent back to the old problems. And I think this is something which deserves very serious attention now, because what it actually is that it's using the old system of a government versus opposition, but now not in terms of two parties, but two blocks or two formations. So it is coalition politics to one extent, but it is the old form of sort of Westminster polarized politics, which is mixed with that. And that combination, I think, is what is at this stage the risk for coalition governments.
Is this the right response, though, from Gauteng, number one, but also looking at the response around the amendment of the executive to get away from the executive system and move away from the executive mayoral system and rather have an executive system where you have the executive being directly elected by council?
Well, we do have it in terms of the Structures Act, the Municipal Structures Act. There's actually 5 systems, of which 3 is specifically referring to executive. There's even a plenary executive system that is possible. The first one that you are now referring to, which is the collective executive system, is where the members of what we call generally the Mayoral Committee, or the executive, is actually elected. And the mayor is more of a chairperson of that committee, and not necessarily the one with the very important executive powers and that actually appoint the Mayoral Committee. This is being used in some parts of the country, and we've also seen that, for example, in the Free State, the MEC for local government there, I've already, before this discussion, been starting to talk about the possibility of moving in that direction in some of the problematic local authorities there. So it is certainly an option. We don't have to change anything in terms of legislation. It is simply a decision by the provinces and the MEC in order to move from one system to another one.
Mm-hmm. Retief Odendaal, Executive Mayor of the Nelson Mandela Bay Municipality, now also joining us on the line. Mayor, good evening and welcome to the show. Have you had the meeting with the MEC as yet?
Well, good evening, and let me just say apologies for the low light that I've got here. We've got load shedding, and unfortunately, it is fairly difficult.
It's a South African story. We totally understand it.
Absolutely. So, no, I haven't had the conversation with the MEC, not. He hasn't even responded. We have submitted the dispute in terms of the intergovernmental relations framework, and we await the response from the MEC, but he hasn't responded to date. But we've done what we needed to do in terms of saying that we have to have a discussion around a round table to find each other.
So did you also just find out through the notice?
Well, look, I mean, this has been coming quite a long time. Just coincidentally, at the same time that the DA announced that we formed a coalition government in Nelson Mandela Bay and that there was a press conference, on that day, the NEC released a notice to say that there is a proposed change in the governance model in Nelson Mandela Bay. Now, to the best of my recollection, that has never happened anywhere in the country that a system of governance has actually changed after a local government elections. It's always been done before a local government elections to prepare the administration for the specific change. So it's just a coincidence that this happened on the day that there was a announcement that a new coalition was formed. And as I've said, it's never been done in South Africa before. Once there was an attempt by the Western Cape government to impose this on the city of Cape Town, just after Helen Zille was appointed the mayor of Cape Town and managed to put a 7-party coalition together. She also at that stage declared a dispute. And it is very clear that this is politically motivated because none of the other methods that was available to the MEC has been embarked on. I've personally asked when I was still in opposition in the legislature that Section 154 interventions need to happen in Nelson Mandela Bay. I've even asked for Section 139 interventions in Nelson Mandela Bay. All of those were ignored. The only thing that the MEC was interested in was bringing the change in governance model, and only when he realized that his party would be voted and ousted out of Nelson Mandela Bay.
Professor Terkutsia, the example that you gave us a bit earlier on about the cooperative governance MEC in the Free State, when was that introduced? Was it also before the November elections?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether it was introduced, but it was in relation to Maluti Pafong, which is one of the most problematic local councils in the country, actually. And they looked at it as an alternative, but whether it has been implemented, I'm not exactly sure. I think what is very important about this system of a collective executive is that in a sense it becomes almost an inclusive government, obviously at the small scale local government, but then things like motions of no confidence is to a large extent almost excluded from this process because it is based on all the main parties that have representation in the council. And I think based on what I would call abuse of motions of no confidence for quite some time already, we have to make a break with the use of motions of no confidence and see if there's not a different dispensation.
Let's quickly bring into the conversation Vuyo Mhlokoti, who is the Deputy Director General of the Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs in the Eastern Cape Province. Good afternoon, and good evening rather, and thank you so much for joining us this evening, Vuyo. Just quickly, what was the intention behind this introduction and this notice?
Good evening, facilitator, and good evening, the rest of the panelists as well. Let me just say that the introduction of the amendment on Section 12 is not a new issue, and it has happened before in many instances. So, Professor is actually correct to say that there is nothing untoward about amending Section 12 to begin to assist in inspection. I think the Mayor is actually incorrect to say that the provincial government had not attempted any other measure in the municipality. So many measures have been attempted. About 2 years ago, before elections last year, we invoked Section 139, Subsection 1, where we issued directives on behalf of the MEC, where we're directing the municipality to begin to address certain issues that could not be addressed. So that was done. Section 154 of the Constitution has always been applied to the municipality, so we have not failed in that regard. I think it's also not correct for him to say that this matter is a political one, because the issue has been coming a long way from around April, when we began to see the non-approval of the budget, non-approval of the ITP, non-compliance with a number of things, poor expenditure, non-sitting of councils, non-sitting of the committees, non-sitting of the Mayoral committee. And these matters have been happening for some time. So when we contemplated then actually invoking the amendment on Section 12, we actually were following a number of series of dysfunctional activities that were happening in the institution. So when the municipality was written to a letter early this year, around June, we identified 4 issues that were actually a problem in the municipality. We then said to the municipality, there was a political instability in the municipality, and this was attributed to a number of things that were not happening in the institution. We then said there was dysfunctional committees, service delivery impacted. We spoke about the Section 80 committees not meeting and Section 7 committees. So I must say that the issues have been monitored by the province for a very long time. So
we just need to quickly go to a break. When we come back, we'll get you to explain that what has now really pushed the MEC to say that now is the time to actually implement this. And also the point that is raised by the executive mayor is that why is this being done when you already have an executive being put in place? That conversation when we come back. And welcome back to this conversation as we look at the executive mayoral system and asking whether indeed it should be scrapped, not only in Nelson Mandela Bay, but do you think it should be scrapped everywhere else in the country? I just need Vuyo Mhlokoti, the DDG for Cooperative, to quickly conclude your point. Vuyo, just quickly on that issue that was raised by the executive mayor as well, is that why would you want to introduce this considering that an executive has already been established? Why not give this coalition government an opportunity to see whether or not they'll be able to stabilize the municipality and provide those services that you say have been lacking?
You'll recall that there are a number of measures that a provincial government or national government can introduce in a municipality to intervene. So in this instance, we had tried the previous other measures which actually did not succeed. I must just amplify this matter by saying that the fact that there's a new coalition government did not actually deter the province from introducing the amendment Section 12. I think there is a mistake here that is being made that the introduction of the new government itself should be able to force the province or compel the province to review its stance. Coalition governments, as Prof indicated earlier on, are not stable and they're not guaranteed that they'll be like this for life. I mean, in the metro in Gqeberha, we've had quite a few turbulences for the past number of years before elections up until now. And I think the overall approach by the province is to ensure that we introduce some kind of sustainable measures to guarantee a bit of stability in the municipality beyond the current coalition. This coalition may actually, we don't know, it may actually crumble at some point. By the time it crumbles, we must be sure that we'll put in place measures to begin to safeguard any dysfunctional status of the institution. That's the overall intention. So the agenda is not about ensuring that we are short-termist in approach, dealing with the current emerging governance structure, but to look beyond that. So that's the overall intention in terms of approach.
So does this mean that this is something that would be implemented everywhere else in the province where there is a coalition government?
Not at all. Remember that there are a number of triggers in relation to what the province must do to begin to intervene. So there's no intention to begin to run through in every municipality in the Eastern Cape. That's not the intention. We'll do the assessment every time there's a problem and see what measures may apply. Yeah. Section 154 obviously becomes a starting point to assist the municipality quite aggressively to begin to address these problems.
Yeah, so Vuyo, it's on that basis then that I asked that why not give this this coalition government an opportunity to see whether or not they'll be able to stabilize they'll be able to stabilize the municipality, also considering that they're part of the 6th administration, but this is the first time that they are actually governing in the 6th administration.
You'll realize that we had issued a notice to the municipality and to SALGA, also published a notice for the stakeholders across the city to begin to express their views. The closing date for those opinions and comments is tomorrow. We'll do an assessment of everything that we've received by end of business tomorrow. So far, we've received quite a few contributions that say they support the amendment of Section 12. In fact, there are very few, I must say, that actually are agreeing with the mayor's sentiments in relation to not amending Section 12. A bulk of what we've received, the submissions, concur with the amendments proposed by the MEC in the Eastern Cape. And I think once we have actually looked at all of them, we'll make a determination in terms of the way forward. So far, we have not made a decision in terms of whether we proceed or not, because we must actually adjudicate the bulk of submissions received.
Okay, Mayor, your response to that?
Well, I think, first of all of the reasonings that were given by the MEC for trying to impose this on the municipality is moot, because all of those issues that were outstanding were dealt with. There's no basis for them to intervene on the letter that was initially written to the city. But I stand by what I've said earlier, is that this has never been done in the country anywhere else. An absolute chaos will ensue if we try and push through this change after a local government election. It has always just been implemented, and the road has been paved towards a change in a system of governance before a local government election. And I also want to say that I was in the provincial legislature until 2 months ago. None of the other avenues available to the provincial government has been followed. No Section 154 support since the November elections, no Section 139 support, no support whatsoever. This is the first kind of intervention by this provincial administration since November 2021. And it stands to beg the question, why then would that notice be sent on the day that an announcement has been made of a new coalition government?
But Mayor, the notice itself, the intention of introducing this amendment was made while the ANC-led coalition was still governing.
Yes, but only on the day that the DA has announced that they formed a new coalition that will bring a motion of no confidence. And I mean, that to me is just a coincidence, or not a coincidence. It's simply not a coincidence. But the fact remains that it's never been done. What we're going to see here is an absolute chaos that's going to ensue as a result of an ANC provincial government that want to ensure that the ANC remain in power in Nelson Mandela Bay. And we've seen that over the last couple of months under an ANC coalition government, the systems in the city have failed.
All right, let's quickly bring in Prof. Prof, considering the opposition here from the Democratic Alliance, what's your take on it? Do you think that the citizens of the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality stand to actually benefit from this? Or is it a case of maybe it is the politicians who will suffer the most?
No, it seems like it's a contest amongst the politicians. No, it doesn't involve at this stage the public. I don't know if the public understands what the issues are at this stage. And I think in the absence of a decision that's taken in advance, before a new administration is established, is a new form of consultation process, which is not necessarily in the legislation, but which can reach some form of consensus, because the moment it's being seen as a political act from the one side or the other, and it is going to benefit the one party or the other, and it's done by the provincial government, I think then there are serious problems. So this is what I guess the relationship between the provincial government and the metro will have to be taken into account during this time. If they want to make changes, but the most appropriate time to make changes is before a new administration is established after an election. Yeah. Otherwise, if it's done midterm, it can cause serious problems to all sides.
Okay, let's conclude the conversation when we come back after this break. And let's get some closing remarks on this conversation around scrapping the executive mayoral system at the Nelson Mandela Bay municipality. Prof, let's start off with you, some closing remarks and what you think the provincial government should be taking into consideration when they're busy with the deliberations around some of the submissions that they've received.
Yes, I think first of all, the executive mayor system is not necessarily one of the best for a coalition situation, because it's almost imposing a type of a presidential system at local government level. So in that sense, we've seen now that might not be the most appropriate for this type of political transition that we are seeing now since 2016 to a large extent. But given where we are now and the fact that these motions of no confidence have created really instability in many parts of the country, the country as a whole and the different governments, the different spheres of government certainly will have to look at what are the different options, but then not to use it for political purposes, and rather in order to try to build a more of an inclusive situation, and instead of using it in order to use it for political competition. I think that should be avoided at all costs.
Okay, and Mayor, your closing remarks, and if the provincial government does decide implementing this system or scrapping the executive mayoral system, would you perhaps explore the court route?
Well, I think, first of all, I need to challenge Mr. Mlokoti to say that perhaps if the provincial government was serious about this change and they did it for the right reasons, they would reach out to the city and try and meet around a round table. I haven't had any discussion. They've ignored my correspondence. And in fact, if they proceed with this matter, I will see them in court, because the reality is that there are a number of issues. In fact, all of the issues that they've raised has already been addressed. So the basis for their intervention in this regard doesn't hold water anymore. But my office is open. I'll engage with the provincial government. I don't know, it seems that they're scared and that they just want to push this thing through for political reasons. But I'll be expecting the call from Mr. Mlokoti or the MEC. My door is open to discuss this.
And DTG, is the intention to meet with the mayor?
Well, there is an intention on the part of the province office to meet all stakeholders, including the mayor as well. I want to just plead to the mayor
when will that meeting be? Do you know?
Well, I think I think there was a plan to be meeting sometime this week. I think we'll have to confirm the date to the mayor once the MEC has come back. Unfortunately, the MEC had to rush to another tragic problem that actually occurred now somewhere in Port St. John's. But I think that the mayor must just be willing to embrace the all-inclusive government that is being proposed and not fear the proposed regime that is going to emerge if the public so supports it. And just be patient as well with regard to the adjudication that will be done once all the public comments have been made. Otherwise, we're open for engagements, and the mayor will be consulted if he wants that. And I think the MEC is so willing to begin to talk to the mayor directly as well. I think the mayor must just appreciate that an amendment on Section 12 has happened before in the last. It's not the first time that were made Section 12 notices.
Do you have an example of where it has happened quickly?
I think it was not in relation to the change of the type. It was also the creation of positions such as full-time positions, deputy executive mayor, chief whip positions. So the amendment of the notice itself has happened, even though we never actually changed the type in the last number of years, but we did amend the notice itself in many instances.
Thank you so much for your time. That's the DTG of COCTA in the Eastern Cape, Vuyo Mlokoti, as well as Professor Dirk Coetzee here from UNISA, and Retief Odendaal, who is the Executive Mayor at the Nelson Mandela Bay Municipality. Thank you so much for choosing us this evening. We are back again next week, Monday, same place, same time, right here on S3.